Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Southerner's Northern Garden. So today I have an interesting video for you. I noticed a few weeks ago that there was an offshoot coming off my hydrangea standard, my limelight hydrangea standards that flank the patio here. And so I've let that grow on, and it's grown rather quickly. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm not going to be necessarily cutting that off because it's growing below the soil level. So what I'm hoping is that there is a root system below there and I can separate it from the mother plant and create another limelight hydrangea standard or begin that training process. This is not something I've done before. I have talked to you about in previous videos about hydrangeas kind of readily will propagate themselves if there's like mulch on top of a branch or something like that. And so since the stem is coming below the soil level, I'm hoping that it already has somewhat of a root system. I haven't investigated it yet. This will be the first time I'm investigating it with you on camera so we can work through the process together. I'm gonna go grab a few tools. I'm gonna get a 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, small little shovel, and then we'll need to get some good biotone, starter fertilizer, and some potting soil. And hopefully this goes really well, and we'll walk you through the process I'm gonna take. So you can probably hear my water fountain very well here, but this is the offshoot I'm talking about here, and it's already down here from soil level taller than the hydrangea standard starts right here, this limelight. And so I'm just gonna dig around the base of it a little bit and kind of see how this is coming off the bottom here. There may not be any root system. In that case, we can try to propagate it. But if there is a little bit of a root system, that will be nice because it will be certainly easier. So let me show you what I'm looking at right here. So you can see right here, I was hoping that it would be a little further down than it is. It was just below soil level. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have to cut this off and try and root it in some good potting soil. It looks like there might be some roots around it. So I'm going to take my 𝗟𝗟𝗲𝗃 and just try and divide it right quick. I don't know how this project will end up, but you just kind of have to, it's typically not recommended to do one this size. And so I'm just going to take my 𝗟𝗟𝗃 here and cut along the side of it. I may have to go get my clippers. I don't want to damage the mother plant. Okay, there we go. So we do not have any roots on this at all, and so I'm not sure that this will live, but I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with it anyway. We'll cover this little sore back up and I'll take you over to where I've got my other supplies. So because we didn't have a root system, this is going to be more of a propagation method since this is a very nice hydrangea stem here. And so typically, like I said, you're not going to be propagating this size. You would take it down pretty good to a leaf node down here. But since we have this beautiful, perfectly straight stem to potentially create a limelight hydrangea in the future, you can see it's pretty pliable. Today is really hot, and so that's probably another reason not to be propagating today. But to propagate hydrangeas, since they do propagate very easily, you don't even necessarily need a rooting hormone, but I use 𝗟𝗏𝗀 right here. I've had it several years. It actually may be expired, but it's still working pretty well for me. So I'm going to remove these bottom leaves. And so these are nodes where the leaves come out of the stem. And so this is where your hydrangeas will root. And so you can see how far I have this down in here. I'm going to remove these bottom two sets of leaves. And then you can see it's already kind of roughed up down here as well. And so they make a liquid rooting hormone that you can use as well. 𝗟𝗏𝗀 has worked pretty well for me. I propagated some things previously. This wasn't intended to be a propagation video, but because there's no roots on this, we do need to use some rooting hormone here. And so typically you will dip the stem in your rooting hormone. I don't have another container with me. You don't want to necessarily be dipping directly in your primary container. And so I'm just going to sprinkle some of this onto those nodes. And I'm even going to sprinkle some where I took it from the mother plant down here and kind of press it in around those nodes. And then what we're going to do is create a hole in the center of this container. This is just full of good potting soil with some compost. And then stick this down in here just like this. as far as I can. Also, when you're rooting hydrangeas or any other shrub, you typically will remove lots of the leaves and only leave a couple. That's the reason for that is because of transpiration from the leaves. You want to minimize as much water loss as you can. I am going to go ahead and do that because I do want this to be a hydrangea standard. If I was not going to be training this into a standard, I would not remove all of these leaves. I would just cut it back and just leave one bottom set here to root. But because we do want this to be a standard, I am going to remove these extra leaves so there's not risk of extra transpiration. And also, because I'm wanting this to be a standard, I am going to top this hydrangea. Let me move it down a little bit so you can see it. I'm going to cut it right here below this set of leaves, and that will encourage it to bush out, just like that. So we just have 3 tiny leaves on it. That's going to keep enough leaves on it that it will continue to photosynthesize so it doesn't die on us. And now I'm going to go water this in quite significantly. Where I'm going to set this today, since it is its kind of first day without its connection to the mother plant, is I will probably put it in my garage in the shade, letting it acclimate a little better to its conditions in this new soil. And then I will set it out most likely on my front porch. The reason for that is it will get a little bit of sun in the morning, but it's not going to get the heavy afternoon sun that could kill it really quickly, essentially. So I'm going to go water this in right quick. And I would water until water runs out of the bottom. So I just set that hydrangea in its container near the entrance to the house in the garage. It's cooler in the garage today. That will give it a little time to acclimate to its new conditions and will prevent the transpiration and water loss that we're having today because it is really hot. So that is a straight kind of propagation method. I wasn't sure if I was going to find the roots when I got down in there or not. I wanted to show you another hydrangea that I have in my garden that could right now be divided from its mother plant. So the hydrangea you're looking at right now is 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲. This one was actually a rooted stem that I found along the hydrangea hedge that had been covered with mulch, as I mentioned previously. So if you take these hydrangea stems and you pin them to the ground, cover them with a little soil or mulch, throughout the season they will root and you can divide them and move them elsewhere in your garden. But in this case, let's see if you can see it here, this hydrangea has actually got this really long offshoot from the mother plant here. So this is a separate, completely separate plant with its own root system I could actually dig down and remove. And these clumping hydrangeas like the arborescens and the macrophylla, you can divide that way. The paniculatas typically cannot be divided that way just since they grow on basically one stem. But the arborescens are a great opportunity to divide. You see I have these really large hydrangeas. I could come through and cut those in halves or quarters right now if I needed more in my garden. It's really simple to divide those, and because they're bunching, they all already have a root system. Now these would root just like I'm trying to root the Limelight hydrangea standard in my garage if I wanted to, and they root fairly quickly. But divisions are much easier on these just because you don't have to deal with that whole rooting process and losing the propagation. So I am not intending to be a knowledge and expert of all things propagation. There are some great, excellent YouTube channels. One guy is called 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, and he does a lot of propagation. He's really excellent at it. And if you're interested in that thing, certainly do some searches online. Jim Putnam from HortTube also has this really interesting propagation setup that he has with a magic leaf, I think it's called, where water mists over the plant seedling. So if you're really into propagation, this is not the channel for you, but there are some really cool methods of propagation out there. So I am not this incredible propagator, never been extremely great at it. I have tried here and there, but I have had some happy accidents in the garden, like the one I just showed you with the Limelight Prime, the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, and this bobo that was actually pinned down with some mulch in my garden a year or so ago. And I just potted it up when I stumbled upon cleaning out the garden bed and noticed that it had roots attached to the stem. and cut it off from the mother plant, and it's been growing in this little container for a while now. Now where I'm going to put this, I have no idea. I may actually pot it up and put it on the patio because bobos do really well in containers since they stay rather small. A few notes on propagation. If you're going to be propagating stuff, just know that a lot of plant varieties, and especially new plant varieties, are protected by patents, and if you propagate them and sell them, you're subject to prosecution under the United States patent laws. Now, if you're doing it in your home garden, I don't think the police are going to come after you. And if it's a happy accident like this, you know, those things happen. We divide our perennials, we save seeds from annuals. It's just kind of how that happens. But do not, under any circumstances, be propagating these for sale to other people because it's illegal. So there are varieties that you could freely propagate, and those are varieties that do not have patents on them. So you would need to do your own research as to whether a patent exists. Typically, patents last 20 years from the date of filing. And so just as a little legal lesson there, this is not legal advice, but just be cognizant of what you're doing. As long as you're doing it in your own garden, there shouldn't be any issues. I'm not saying there won't be. So I encourage you to get out in your garden this spring and maybe this fall after you've heavily mulched your beds and see if you have any happy accidents. If you do, cut them off from the mother plant and pot them up. They certainly will give you joy for years to come. This one is probably headed for a container, as I mentioned, on my patio, and I'm really excited to see what joy it brings me. Thank you guys for joining me, and remember, in a world full of hate, be a light. Take care.